I remember when I was a kid, the first time I went off the high dive, the tall one, they wouldn't let you go until you were a certain age. You kept having to bug the lifeguards. I don't know why there were so many teenage boys hanging around the lifeguard stand, but they were there all the time. So once you got through the crowd, I'd ask her, can I jump on that yet? And one day she said, yeah. And I thought, this is awesome. I'm a big kid now. So I get up, and I'm sure it wasn't anything spectacular. I think I just jumped. I didn't try to dive because that would have been disastrous. But I remember being under the water and surprised how long the surface was from me. I didn't count on that. I thought, I'll be there in a second. Felt like an eternity. It did, and I'm like, I'm not ever doing this again. I'm going to die. And I wasn't interested in a lifeguard because I was only, probably 7 or 8. I don't know how old I was, but that feeling, just wanting to breathe, it was, I think, the first time I had experienced that as a kid. I want you to imagine something with me today. Imagine being underwater. You're not swimming, you're held under. You're struggling, you're panicking, you're fighting, your lungs are burning, your chest is tightening. Sometimes it happens when you play with a friend and they're trying to think it's funny to dunk you and you're under there too long and all you can think about is air. That's all you can think about, air. There's nothing else that matters, not your job. You don't think about your plans or your schedule, just one breath. Then you break the surface and you inhale and it's deep and it's sharp. It's alive. I mean, it's amazing. It's like that one thing I took for granted. Life just rushes in. You break the surface. That's an amazing moment. That first breath changes everything. Last week was heavy. For those of you who were here, we walked through the pain the disciples experienced when Jesus died on the cross. The message wasn't just he is risen. It was to glorify he was risen. We dive deeper into understanding how painful it was without him. And then we walked with the disciples and experienced that darkness and uncertainty as Jesus lay dead. We put ourselves in their place last week, wondering what they were thinking when they were feeling that loss, that hopelessness, everything they'd hoped for, all they could think about in that moment, they weren't thinking about his promises or anything else. They were just thinking, everything is gone. We felt it too for a minute. The time before the resurrection, what now? Where do we go from here? Well, for them, it was like being underwater. Hope was gone. Direction was gone. Everything they believed felt like it had just collapsed in on them. The whole world seemed darker. They were gasping. They were gasping for something to make sense again, for some kind of life to come back inside. And then Sunday came, and it was like breaking the surface. Breaking the surface. Life. I'm alive. He's alive. And that's why I'm alive. The resurrection. And today, that's what the message is about. Taking a deep breath. Put that feeling, and that's what we're going to talk about. It's an optimistic message today. Because what we felt like and what they thought was the end was a new beginning. And that's where we are. And I know people walk in here with issues. You feel like you're underwater. Something's going on. I don't know. Maybe you're battling an illness, you lost someone. There's all kinds of things that take over. Sometimes it feels like you're holding your breath or you're trapped underwater. But today, God says, come up for air. And that's what the resurrection demonstrated. It's not about that silence that we talked about. It's about what comes after that feeling of hopelessness and loss. It's about taking a deep breath. God specializes in new beginnings. I mean, the disciples didn't understand in that moment is that God wasn't finished yet. Lamentation says his mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Every day, God gives you something new, a new start, a new opportunity, a new chance to walk with him, a new look. Everybody's got baggage. Even if it's minimal, we all have baggage. And I know it's real, but it's not permanent. Their baggage would have seemed real when they were sitting in the dark thinking he was dead. And the resurrection come. The disciples thought it was over, but it was just the beginning. And that's your life too. Again, I don't want to keep revisiting it, but they thought their mission had failed. Hope had ended. Hope is gone. Have you ever been there? I have. I've been there. I've been in everything collapsing at once. Your job, your home, your life, self-sabotage. I was a victim of me. And a lot of us have experienced that. It's a hard pill to swallow to admit that, but it happens in our life. Even successful people self-sabotage when they don't mean to. I've been working on a message called The Battle of Self. It was going to appear today, but it's just not quite there yet. But they thought it was all gone. In reality, it was a chapter that was just beginning. And I've had many times to start over. And for us, what feels like the end is God's new beginnings. John 20:19 says, the doors were locked for fear. Remember, they were hiding. They were hiding when they thought he was gone. Then just a few verses later, Jesus is standing there in the room. Do you ever have, I tell people who have hard times all the time, when they say, oh, I can't believe this happened. I didn't see this coming. The good stuff comes that way too, not just the bad stuff. I've had good stuff pop up in my life. I'm like, boy, that came at the nick of time. Wow, I can't believe this happened. The good stuff's always there too. Jesus was standing in the room, it says, just a few verses later. Why? Because Jesus steps into locked rooms. Jesus steps into lost hearts. Jesus steps into the broken moments of your life when you don't think he is. He went into a locked room. That says he does that when we're standing there in hopelessness. And spring is a picture of what God does. Look around. Spring is here now. Spring is here now. I mean, they're up there working in the garden now. There's the buds are on the trees. I'm able to walk outside in my boxers and my tank top that says Lee surrendered, I didn't. I'm just kidding. I don't have a tank top that says Lee surrendered, I didn't. But it's here. It's Isaiah. See, I am doing a new thing. I am doing a new thing. Everything that looked dead is coming back to life. That's when we look at the creation, like when Paul talks about that, we see the nature of God and how he works. I talked about winter in the sermon I mentioned earlier. I talked about the closeness, the warmth, the togetherness, the reason it works for us and what it does for us. But now it's spring. He is risen. And now we have a new beginning. And this isn't just Easter. This is for our lives. God's always in the business of renewal. Dead things come to life. Things grow in dry places. Cold seasons go away. The warm ones are here now. It is for you today. God can do that to the earth. He's doing it in you, and he can do it with you. Because of the resurrection, that's the whole reason we're not stuck. We're not stuck in winter. Think about that. It's already frustrating enough that it still lingers. Go away. We're not stuck, though. We're not stuck there wondering what's going to happen now. Now we know. 2 Corinthians, if anyone is in Christ, he's a new creation has come. You're not who you were anymore. You are God. I tell, when I work with addicts, I tell them this. I go, we're not changing you from an addict into a better person. I go, we're carving off the part of you that was never supposed to be there. We're going to go be the person you were created to be. So we're not making you a new person. God already knew what kind of person he wanted you to be. So we just got to cut this stuff off. The enemy decorated you with punishment, and so you can become the person you were to be originally. That's the way it works. And hope just doesn't just happen. You have to choose it. You have to choose it daily. The Bible calls God the God of hope in Romans. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace. We know the hope grows when you draw closer to God. The closer you move toward God, the brighter your outlook gets. And whenever you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. When you say yes to hope, You're saying no to discontent. You're saying no to complaining. A hopeful heart doesn't complain. I just did a mini sermon on complaining. I posted it online. It's really short. It's got more views than any of the sermons. Like, that's the way the people telling me, we like you in small doses, Drew. I was going to do a whole sermon about it, but when I was reading it, it sounded like me complaining about complaining. I said, boy, this is a real head scratcher. Maybe people don't want to hear that. But so I just did a little brief thing on it. I know some of us carry a lot of spiritual weight. I know people in this church, and there's things that never go away. There's losses we experience. You still carry them with you. Uncertainty, and sometimes uncertainty can lead to fear. And even when we cling to Christ, we're human. We still experience it. The resurrection is God's way of saying it's okay. Take a deep breath. You're not alone. You're not abandoned. Your story is definitely not over. What does this look like practically, Pastor? Take a deep breath. That's a nice metaphor, but what's it mean? It means you trust God with tomorrow. It means you let go of things you can't control. And some of us cling tight to the things we can't control. It means you choose faith over fear. I know, that's an old saying, but it's an old saying for a reason. You choose faith over fear. Because having peace, the most difficult thing to learn for Christians, having peace doesn't mean it's the absence of problems. It's the presence of Christ in their midst. Last week we stood at the tomb. So this week we walk outside and take a deep breath. Now we know. That's what's amazing about the disciples, the apostles. They died in horrible ways. After they stepped outside the tomb, took a deep breath, they thought, there's nothing this world can do to me. No, I don't. Peter's crucified upside down. John said, boil me. I don't care. No matter what, I could die a martyr's death, live in the wilderness, and start, no matter what, in this temporary place. It cannot take eternity for me. That's how they were able to so easily, well, it wasn't easy, but to become martyrs for the truth. The resurrection said, I can take a deep breath. I got nothing to worry about here. It really puts things in their place. We don't live like it's still Friday. We don't live like it's still Saturday, because Sunday had come. Shane, take a deep breath. God's not finished. Dennis, take a deep breath. New life is already beginning. Dave Kloss, I know he's out there. Take a deep breath, Dave. Your best days aren't behind you, they're ahead of you. In Christ, the same God who raised Jesus from the dead can raise us back from our problems, is going to raise us from the dead, can see us through all this. Think about where we started. Let's go back there for a minute. That whole idea of being underwater, needing air so bad, struggling, and that whole panic thing and that desperation. And some people have that all the time. Remember what it felt like when you finally broke the surface. That rush of life, that time when everything changed. Because the question is that we have to ask ourselves, if we take in the resurrection we talked about last week and what it means and how we apply it to life, is I want to live above the surface all the time. I want to live above the surface. I don't ever want to gasp for air again. That's the mindset of the disciples when they walked outside the tomb, took a deep breath. Because some people come up for air on Sunday only. And then Monday they go right back under the water. Some folks see church as a spiritual, they go every week, but it's like, let me go fill my spiritual gas tank. And then they do what I did when I was like 19. They fill it up just to get past E. Just enough to get past E. They have hope for a minute. There's peace for a minute. There's some clarity while I'm there interacting with folks. But then Monday comes and drift right back. Anytime you drift If you're in a congregation and you're in fellowship, which is commanded by the Bible, contrary to what some people say, I don't understand these people. I don't like organized religion. As opposed to what? Disorganized religion? That's just the dumbest thing I ever heard. But anyway, when you drift out of fellowship, drifting currents only take you away from God. Drifting currents only drift away from God. And the way to stop drifting is to stay in fellowship. God didn't raise you up just so you could go back under again. The resurrection wasn't for us to walk away from. Once the disciples knew that, that's how they became so fearless. They weren't afraid to die. They saw firsthand death. He defeated death. He's doing that for us. I got nothing to worry about. Things are going to hurt, but I'm going to go on. It wasn't just a moment. The resurrection was an invitation. Take a deep breath. You don't have anything to fear. That's where we are today. This is an optimistic message. This is a time of new beginnings, whether it be in your relationships, your projects, your heart. But it all starts with knowing this. There's nothing that can happen to you when you're with Christ. Even when the world does bad things to you, that can take away what you've been given in the future. It's an invitation to live differently, to breathe differently, to walk differently. Romans says, just as Christ was raised from the dead, we too may have new life. You stay in fellowship, you don't have to live gasping anymore. Remember, your future is secure. You don't have to live like you're drowning. You keep the eternal perspective that I always talk about. And you don't have to live like hope is out of reach. It's not out of reach. It never is. No more victim language. That's an enemy. You've already been brought to the surface. So when life tries to pull you back under or fear creeps in, take a deep breath. Remember who God is, what He's done, what He's promised. The same God who lifted Jesus out of the grave is the same God who keeps you above the surface. So don't go back under, stay where the air is, right? What do I say? Make life better. Make life better. The first day of the calendar year should be Easter Sunday for the Christian, spiritually speaking. Resurrection. So there was this teenage girl, her name's Bethany Hamilton, and she was 13 years old. And she was starting to become a rising star, and she was a surfer in the surfing world. So everything she loved revolved around the ocean. That was her identity. That's who she was. Her dreams, her future, they all pointed in one direction, right out to the beach, right out to the ocean. And then one morning, everything changed. Bethany was attacked by a 14-foot tiger shark. And it clamped down and ripped her little body side to side and tore off her arm. And you can see the pain and brokenness in that family as that little girl, 13 years old, lays there with no arm. In an instant, it was gone. And she lost 60% of the blood in her body. And her life was teetering, to say the least. And she woke up in the hospital to what seemed like, something impossible to accept. She wasn't just asking herself, will I surf again? She said she was asking herself, who am I now? Who am I? I mean, everything about her life that defined her, that she was, that her goals, her visions, her dreams, who even am I now? That's what she was asking herself, because what she loved most was gone. Yeah, we talked about the disciples. That's not just hopelessness. There she is on the right. Look at her smiling. All that pain, all that hopelessness. She's smiling because she's a tough kid and there was a turning point. God was in the middle of loss for her for what she lost. And she later said something pretty remarkable. Bethany said this, as a kid said this. This is wisdom beyond her years. She said, when they were asking her about this, and she was talking about her life, and she goes, I don't need easy. I just need possible with God. Amen. Wow. For a young person to have that kind of spiritual strength and fortitude. Look at her laying there. That's how old she was when she said that. So I'm sure people said, this isn't going to be easy to get your life back together. She goes, I don't need easy. I just need possible with God. That's a different kind of faith, man. That's not a faith that says, hey, fix this. Nope. That's a faith that says, even if it's not fixed, I know you're still with me. That's a powerful faith. The realization in her life, that changed everything for her. You know? I mean, it wasn't her circumstances at first, but it was her perspective, and that affects everything. One day after the shark attack, she got right back on a surfboard. 1 month, not one day. 1 month after the shark, she got right back on a surfboard. If we could pause for a minute and just say, after the resurrection, when we walk out of the tomb and breathe in, she walked out with God. We walk out, no matter what kind of things we're facing, we're going to lose limbs or friends or jobs, or she can do it. I don't need easy. I just need possible with God. Look at her. That's amazing. She got back on that surfboard. She refused to let the worst moment in her life define the rest of her life. And she became a professional surfer again. She inspired millions, you know. And the most important thing she did was she used her story to inspire other people's faith, their Christian faith. And that's amazing. You know, it looked like the end for her. I mean, she could have died easily, but it was, everybody knows about the artery and, you know, what's going on there. And this isn't a person who was amputated in a car wreck or something. I mean, you think about the violence involved. We all know about sharks and the violence involved. And still, she says, she just needs, with God, all things are possible. She didn't lock hands with the world and wallow in victim language and self-pity. She took a deep breath and spoke victory language because God was present. You know, your identity cannot be taken away from you if it's rooted in God. It cannot be taken away if it's rooted in God. Bethany lost her arm. She didn't lose her purpose. If your identity is in anything temporary, this world will take it. If her identity would have been a surfer, it would be over for her. But her identity wasn't in being a surfer. She still got attacked, right? That hurts. Still happened. Can't forget about that. God didn't stop that pain. He let it. It happened, but He was in the middle of it. What did I say a minute ago? We live in a fallen world. Jesus told us it's going to be terrible down here. God said there's going to be pain, there's going to be suffering. Jesus said there'll be people executed in my name. Long story short, God says it's going to hurt down there. Know this, I'm with you. It's like I said a second ago, having peace doesn't mean there's no hard times or no pain. It means Christ is with us in the midst of it. Faith isn't proven by avoiding hardship. It's proven by trusting God through it. You know, what feels like an ending for her, surely she embraced it as a redirection, because Bethany thought her surfing career was over, but she was wrong. Sometimes God doesn't restore what we had before. He leads us to something greater. I know that firsthand. That's what He did with me. There she was. I don't need easy. I just need with God all things are possible. After she survived, got back on that, Bethany wasn't weaker. She was stronger. She wasn't fearful. She was bold. She wasn't uncertain. She was grounded. She knew where her identity was. She walked out of the tomb, took that breath of fresh air, and said, anything's possible now. Give me your worst, world. Like the disciples when Jesus was dead in the tomb, she had seen God show up in the impossible. You know, that's a challenge we have to ask ourselves a lot. You know, if you have something taken away from us at some point in life, a dream or a relationship or something like that, because we all have. We've had something. It feels that way, and it happens, and it feels like everything has changed. But God didn't leave when things fell apart. I know it feels like it, but he didn't. He's right there in it. And just like Bethany, this isn't the end of your story. Because you've walked through hopelessness and then seen God bring life out of it. You have. We're here. We're all right. We're okay. We're going to make it. The same God who meets you in your worst moment is the one who's going to carry you into your greatest purpose. We step outside the tomb from last week and take a deep breath. The things that are troubling you, take a deep breath. I heard somebody say one time, there's 2 rules in life. Number 1 is don't sweat the small stuff, and number 2 is it's all small stuff. The same God who meets us in that moment, once we know that, we can take that breath, stop living in fear, living in faith. You're here in church today. It wasn't an accident. God tapped you on the shoulder. The Bible says the Holy Spirit dragged you here. You should listen, take a deep breath, and walk away from the wreckage of your past and let it burn. And keep walking. Because that's what we do. Walk the rest of this road with God, the eternal perspective, so you can feel safe in what is to come when this temporary is over. We learned all the heavy stuff last week. Now we walk outside the tomb, take a deep breath, and live that. All right.